In this video, we will look at the regulatory environment for the accounting profession. So firstly then, why is regulation needed when publishing financial statements? So there are a multitude of reasons. Firstly, it will influence decisions made by stakeholders with the minimum amount of detail possible. Not all stakeholders are going to be able to understand lengthy financial statements. So if we can keep it to the minimum amount of detail, that should help them. It ensures that stakeholders' needs are met. It gives them the statements in a way that they should be able to easily understand. It promotes consistency and comparability, making each year's financial statements comparable, and therefore stakeholders can use them to easily create and identify any patterns. Different countries are subject to various economic, social, and political regulations, however, so that is something that you do need to watch out for. Elements of a regulatory environment then. Firstly, we have local law. We have local accounting standards. We have international accounting standards, which are known as the IABS principles. And we have the conceptual frameworks, as well as international body requirements. So all of these will need to be met. So something that you may have heard of is the GAAP, which stands for the Generally Accepted Accounting Practice. So the whole idea of this is then it defines the accepted accounting policies and practices at a given time by looking at the conventions, rules, and procedures which are necessary. It indicates broad guidelines as well as more intricate, detailed procedures. It includes local legislation, local regulations, as well as accounting standards. So there are two approaches then that we can use to actually adopt an accounting standard. So there is the principles-based approach, which is our first one. This is widely used in the UK, and it is a set of principles which are drawn out and accounting standards are set. The standards set down the principle of the accounting treatment. The approach which is used is by the board and is set out in the conceptual framework. And like previously stated, it is the approach that is currently used in the UK. Contrary, we have our rules-based approach. So this is a set of detailed and specific rules which are set down, which must be followed by the book. It is referred to as the tick list approach because it has to be adhered to no matter what. And it is an approach that is based in the US. So international financial reporting standards then. We can look at this as a tree diagram. So at the top, we have our IFRS Foundation, supported by our IFRS Advisory Council, our IASB, otherwise known as the International Accounting Standards Board, or the IFRS Interpretations Committee. So firstly then, we will delve a bit deeper into what the IFRS Foundation actually is and what does it do. So it was established in March 2001, so it's not that old. It's a non-profit making body and it is run by many trustees. It is overseen by the IFRS Foundation Monitoring Board. So what are the trustees of the IFRS Foundation responsible for? So firstly, they are responsible for appointing any members of the boards, the International Financial Reporting Interpretation Committee, and the IFRS Advisory Council. They will review the board's strategy annually, and they will determine the funding of the board through any annual approval of budgets. They will review any strategic issues that may affect any accounting standards, and they will ensure the application of all IAS. They will also promote the work of the board. They will establish and amend any operating procedures also. So, secondly then, the ISB, otherwise known as the International Accounting Standards Board. What do they do and who are they? So the board will consist of members, and it is responsible for developing international accounting standards, which are now referred to as the IFRS. All members are appointed on a 5-year term and may be renewed. However, they can only be renewed once over. They have all the responsibility for all technical matters, including preparing, publicising and withdrawing IFRS standards and exposure drafts. Next up, we have the IFRS Advisory Council. So this is made up of approximately 30 members, providing a forum for organisations and individuals to participate in the process for standard setting. Members will be appointed by trustees of varying backgrounds, and this has a renewable term of just 3 years, and they will meet a number of times per year. So, what are the objectives then of the IFRS Advisory Council? Well, they're there to give advice to the board on agenda decisions and work priorities, but they will also inform the board of any opinions or viewpoints that they may have. They will give any other relevant advice also to the board or to the trustees. Next up, we have the IFRS Interpretation Committee. So this was formerly known as the IFRIC. It assists the board by reviewing any accounting issues. Their aim is to achieve an appropriate accounting treatment. And it was established in 2002 by the IFRS Foundation, and it replaced the Standards Interpretation Committee, formerly known as the SIC. So, what is the main responsibilities then for the Interpretation Committee? Well, they're in charge of reviewing any new financial reporting issues that arise within a timely manner. They will provide clarity whereby any unsatisfactory or conflicting views have developed with a view to resolving any issues with the most appropriate basis. We now have the International Organisation of Securities Commission, which is also known as the IOSCO. So they are a representative body of the world securities market regulators. They worked with the board since 1987 to promote accounting standards. Since the mid-1990s, IOSCO and the board have worked together to create core standards, and this was finally completed in 1999. In May 2000, that should say, IOSCO issued a report to its members recommending that they use the IFRS when preparing any financial statements. So the IOSCO representatives do sit as observers on the IFRS Interpretations Committee as well. We now move on to the International Integrated Reporting Council, otherwise known as the IIRC. So this is a global coalition of regulators, investors, companies, standard setters, the accounting profession, academia, and NGOs. So it is quite big. Their job is to promote communication regarding value creation as the next step in corporate reporting. So this is based the introduction towards integrated reports. So I mentioned the term integrated reports, but this may not be something that you're familiar with. So what exactly are they? Well, it is the ability to report on an entity's ability to create value. It considers the needs of a wide variety of stakeholders, and it enables entities to disclose any details with regard to value creation. So this could range from your company's reputation to staff morale to your own staff skill set. This does not include just the financial statements, but this is everything. So then, you need to be aware of the standard setting processes for IFRSs. So with this in mind, the advisory committee will be established to provide any advice on any issues of a project. The board would then consult with the advisory committee throughout the process. For any major project, the board develops and publishes a discussion paper for public comment to give an overview of any issues and possible solutions with an invitation for feedback. After feedback has been given, an exposure draft will be drafted for public comment. The exposure draft is made available for the final review and can still be amended before final approval as a reporting standard. So upon review of those comments, the approved IFRS will be published, including a date from which it will come into play. So then, a country who chooses to adopt international standards can do so in a number of ways. They can either adopt the international standards as a local GAAP. So this would usually be in countries where the accounting profession isn't really very well developed, and adopting the international standards would mean little or no amendments. So you wouldn't need so much expertise to actually create the standard, you would just be able to implement them straight away to the rulebook. Because of that, it's obviously quick to implement, and there's no country-specific requirements. Ultimately, that could be a downside because you may need something specific to the country, dependent on various factors such as the political, the environment, and the economic surroundings. We could use the international standards as a model to create local GAAP. So this would obviously involve countries taking the international standards and then amending them to reflect upon the country's needs. So for that, you would obviously need somebody with enough expertise to be able to adapt them to become suitable. Alternatively, we could use the international standards as a persuasive influence in preparing a local GAAP. So if a country already has its own standards, but they differ to IFRS standards, this may be used. IFRS standards will be used to update local standards to ensure that they comply with IFRS standards in all material aspects. Or a country may choose to prepare local GAAP with no reference to any international standards, which of course has both advantages and disadvantages. It is of course going to be much better suited to each country. However, it's going to take a lot longer to implement, and of course you need the right skill set to be able to do that.